EpicDev podcast, tech products that work.
What we get a lot are things where people want to replicate things that are quite popular in the markets at the moment. They want to replicate that for their own businesses, but potentially what they're looking to do is, I suppose, have ownership over the product. So I'll give you a silly example. So one thing that happens a lot is restaurants that have, or takeaway chains that have sort of grown a bit, and there are a couple of these restaurants around in a certain area, and then they immediately start feeling like, okay, we want some sort of delivery app. And the first thing they think of is Uber. That's like a very popular request, or not popular request, but a request that we get very often, is they suddenly now want you to build an Uber Eats or a Mr. D for their operation. The business is doing well, and they've got, say, 7 different takeaway shops in various locations, and they feel like, okay, this is the next step. And then I would often, when we start speaking about the sort of timeline and budget that would go into something like this, that's where they start feeling a little bit maybe not as excited about the idea anymore.
A bit apprehensive, maybe.
A bit apprehensive now, all of a sudden, But, most of them are sort of, they realize, okay, yeah, fair enough. This is like cutting edge technology. And but what I try and do from my side is to kind of soften the blow a little bit as I first start speaking about the fact that there are probably quite a lot of solutions out there. And I immediately start with a bit of industry jargon, as they would see it, such as, have you looked around for some white labeled solutions? And at that stage, the response might be, well, what do you mean by white labeled solutions? And that's where I start talking about these things and explaining and educating a little bit. So I take the time to try and educate the person on the other end of the phone to just get their brain to work in a little bit of a different, or think in a bit of a different way about how the solution can be applied. And as we go down that discussion, I'll start explaining, okay, look, usually with these sorts of things, since it's been done, there's going to be guys that have now already invested quite a lot of time and resources into replicating that solution, for example, Uber Eats, and they're going to make it their business to then license that out to a whole lot of companies, because a whole lot of companies are going to want that solution. That's a given. Like, you're not the only guy that's just thought of this. Like, there's hundreds of thousands of guys around the globe that have thought of the same thing.
Yeah.
And sure, if you really have put yourself on the map and you have enough chains and you do have that sort of budget, then by all means, there might be a reason as to why, like, you might have already thought of all those things. The fact that there's white labeled solutions out there. In that discussion, I would discover that with the person. They'll soon push back and say, yes, we've looked at white labeled solutions, but we need it to be our intellectual property.
Yeah.
We usually use the acronym IP. We have to have it be our IP because of such and such reasons, and then fine, then we can explore. But more often than not, when you start explaining white labeled solutions and licensing these things, you completely change the way these guys are thinking, and they start exploring those solutions. And I think sometimes I also hope that if they go down that road and they find a white label solution that would work for them, that they would come back to us and say, would you help me implement it? Because even though you go find yourself a solution like that, it's also not always plug and play the way people hope for it to be.
If you could maybe take a brief moment, perhaps there's somebody watching this or listening to it who's literally in this position right now. They've got a chain and they've been thinking of this idea to build an app, and they hear you throwing this terminology, white labeled solution, around. Wouldn't you maybe just give like a very brief description for somebody as to what exactly is that? What are they looking for when they're comparing or considering white labeled solutions?
Yeah, so I think you got to do your due diligence. So first of all, let's clearly define a white label solution. So basically what it is that someone else has gone and developed the software, but they've developed it in such a way that it can be, your colors and your brand can be applied to it very quickly and very easily. So it was, imagine Uber Eats has got a way of resetting the brand and immediately adopting your brand. So that's basically what a white label is. So hence the terminology white label. So it's a blank label onto which you can stamp your brand. Okay, and what they need to look out for is, first of all, reputation. You're going to want to do, so the same way that you would go if you want to purchase a product, let's say off of Takealot even, if you thought to yourself, okay, there's this product, I'm going to do a little bit of due diligence on it. Okay, those of us that have done enough e-commerce shopping know that the process of doing your due diligence in terms of reading the reviews and maybe even going on to social media, which is like an unbiased third party where you can go and read what people are saying about this product, especially if you're buying from somewhere that you've never bought from before. You know, you might already be so used to buying from Takealot and Amazon, and you might have already been through the process where you've done a return, and you then realize that they handle that with great seriousness, because they understand that the trust factor is a big hurdle to get over for consumers buying online. So you'd find yourself, if you've been through that process and you're now looking at the specific thing that you can only find this one shop selling online that you've never shopped at before, you're going to do quite a bit of research before you actually pull the trigger and hand them your hard-earned money. Now, you need to do that same sort of thing when it comes to these white label solutions. Chances are there's going to be quite a few options, and then you've got to start sifting through some data online that you can make an informed decision about parting with your money.